we're going back to exceptions at this point of the course in order to explain some additional exceptions that you should know and that are related to objects and classes. A little reminder, exceptions are events that occur at runtime and that break the flow of instructions of a program. We have already seen three exceptions: arithmetic exception, array index out of bounds exception, and number format exception. The next exception that we are going to see is null pointer exception. This exception is thrown when the program tries to use a variable that is not of primitive type and that has not been initialized yet. We are trying to use a variable that should point at an object that has not been created yet. For example, if we create an instance of the string s with the text myString and then we want to print its length using the method length, we will get the value 8 on screen. The string myString has 8 characters. Everything works well. However, if we try to do the same but without having created the instance of the string s first, then the program will throw a null pointer exception. This exception will be thrown when trying to call the method length of the string s. That is, when trying to use a variable that has not been initialized yet. Another example. Imagine that we want to print the length of an array that we have declared, but that we have not initialized. Then we will get the same null pointer exception. Be aware that length is a method in the case of the class string, but an attribute in the case of arrays. Actually, if we try to access position 0 in an array that has not been initialized, the program will throw a null pointer exception and not an array index out of bounds exception. In these examples, it's very easy to detect that we are trying to use a variable that has not been initialized. However, when we are programming, we define methods that receive arguments and that are invoked from other objects. In these cases, detecting variables that have not been initialized is not so immediate. The second exception related to objects and classes that we're going to see is class cast exception. To illustrate this exception, we have this hierarchy of classes, where vehicle is the superclass and car and bike are the subclasses. According to this hierarchy, it's possible to create an instance of the car class and assign it to a variable of type vehicle, because a car is also a vehicle. This casting is correct and allows us to take advantage of the property of polymorphism, storing in a single array of vehicles a set of objects of the classes car and bike. Later on in the program, we may need to cast this instance to an object of the car class. That is correct. The only condition Java imposes is to make this casting explicit. However, if we try to cast this instance to an object of the bike class instead, the program will throw a class cast exception at runtime because the object in the variable v is not a bike. We have already seen in this course how to handle exceptions that are thrown when some predefined events occur in the programs using the try-catch statement. However, we can also program methods that need to throw exceptions under certain circumstances. In order to explicitly throw exceptions in a method, we need to use the keyword throw and create instances of the particular exceptions that the method is expected to throw. The same method can throw several exceptions, depending on the particular circumstances. For example, we can check that the objects our method is receiving are not null, and if so, we can throw an exception. Java already has some well-known exceptions that we can throw. In this example, we can throw an illegal state exception with a message indicating that the argument we are receiving has not been initialized. That is, does not have the appropriate state at this time of the sequence of instructions. Let's see some more examples. If we define a method division that receives two integers, dividend and divisor, then we need to check that the divisor is not 0. Otherwise, we will need to throw an exception. In this case, we can throw another well-known exception in Java, illegal argument exception, to indicate that the method has received an illegal or inappropriate argument. The same applies, for example, to a method that calculates the factorial of a number, but in this case when the argument received is less than 0. We have seen in this video two examples of exceptions that are related to the concepts of objects and classes: null pointer exception and class cast exception. In the past, we saw how to handle exceptions using the try-catch statement. In this video, we have seen how to throw exceptions with personalized messages in the methods that we are programming.